Revenge with Karen.
If you walked past my office, you wouldn't see a war room. You wouldn't see people screaming into phones or throwing stress balls at glass walls. You'd just see me, Emily, sitting behind a dual monitor setup, sipping lukewarm green tea, scrolling through PDF lines that would make a normal human's eyes bleed. I'm a rights and licensing strategist. It sounds boring, I know. It sounds like the kind of job you describe at a dinner party just to make sure nobody asks you a follow-up question. But here's the reality. I am the structural engineer of a billion-dollar house of cards. We were 6 months deep into Project Meridian, a massive content acquisition deal that was supposed to merge 3 mid-sized streaming libraries into one gargantuan platform. The press releases were already drafted. Stock price was twitching in anticipation. Everyone saw the flashy headlines, the projected revenue, the subscriber growth. Nobody saw the grime. Nobody saw the thousands of fragmented copyright clauses, the territorial restrictions from 1998, the music sync licenses that expired if you looked at them the wrong way. That was my world. I was the one untangling a knotted ball of Christmas lights the size of the Atlantic Ocean, knew where the bodies were buried, because I was the one who dug the graves and signed the death certificates. Every single asset we were buying had a poison pill clause, a little legal landmine that could blow up the entire acquisition if not neutralized with a specific handwritten addendum. And for 5 years, I was the only person who knew the codes to defuse them. It's funny how people perceive value in corporate America. They see the guy standing on the stage, waving his arms. They think that's the leader. They see the woman in the corner, reading the fine print, and they think that's the help. By the way, if you're into stories about the help realizing they actually hold the keys to the castle and burning it down, do me a quick favor and hit subscribe and drop a like. It actually helps get these stories out to people who need a little vicarious revenge in their cubicles. Seriously, it takes a second. Okay, back to the impending train wreck. To Brad. Brad was our new CEO, brought in by the board because the previous one was too cautious. Brad wasn't cautious. Brad was a former investment banker who wore suits that cost more than my first car and smelled like sandalwood and unearned confidence. He didn't know the difference between a mechanical license and a synchronization right, but he knew how to smile with all 32 teeth. The first time I met Brad, he walked into my office without knocking, sat on the edge of my desk, right on top of a stack of sensitive non-disclosure agreements, and looked around like he was inspecting a janitor's closet. "So, Emily," he said, mispronouncing my title immediately, "you're the compliance girl." I slowly took off my reading glasses. "I'm the director of rights and strategic licensing, Brad." Right. Compliance. "Listen, I'm looking at the timeline for Meridian. You've got a 4-week review period flagged here for IP clearance. That's gotta go. We need to close before the quarter ends. Chop it to 3 days." I stared at him. He wasn't joking. He was looking at a legal process that involved negotiating with estate lawyers in 3 different countries, as if it were a DoorDash order he could just expedite with an extra $5. "Brad," I said, keeping my voice level, "the way you talk to a toddler holding a knife. If we rush the clearance, we inherit the liability. Specifically, master recording rights for the entire 90s catalog. If we trigger the change of control clause without the waivers, we lose the content but keep the debt. It's a 4-week process. Minimum," he laughed, a short, bark-like sound. "You lawyers, always seeing ghosts. It's a standard acquisition, Emily. Don't overthink it, just get it done. I want to announce this at the investor showcase next month." He hopped off the desk, wrinkling the NDAs, and finger-gunned me on the way out. "A team player, Em. We're disrupting the industry here." That was the moment. The opening shotgun blast, if you will. I sat there, looking at the door he'd left open, listening to the heavy thud of his loafers retreating down the hall. He didn't care about the structural integrity of the deal. He just wanted to cut the ribbon on the building before it collapsed. I looked back at my screen. Line 405 of the master agreement. In the event of a change in executive leadership prior to full ratification, all derivative rights revert to the original license holder, unless explicitly countersigned by the acting director of licensing. The acting director of licensing. Me. Brad didn't know that clause existed. He didn't know that the entire foundation of his disruption was resting on my signature, which I hadn't given yet. He saw me as a speed bump, had no idea I was the only thing keeping the bridge from falling into the river. I picked up my tea. It was cold. I drank it anyway. If he wanted to play chicken with $1 billion, I wasn't going to be the one to swerve. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Insurance. The erasure didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, suffocating drift, like carbon monoxide filling a room. First, it was the meeting invites. The weekly strategy sync meetings, which I had attended for 5 years, suddenly dropped off my calendar. When I asked Brad's executive assistant about it, she gave me a pitying look, the kind you give a dog that's about to be put down, and said, "Oh, Brad feels those meetings should be strictly for revenue-generating leadership. He said he'd loop you in if there are any paperwork questions." Paperwork. That's what he called the legal framework that kept us from being sued into oblivion, and came the renaming. In the company-wide newsletter, my department, formerly Strategic Rights Management, was listed under Operational Support. We were moved on the org chart from reporting to the COO to reporting to the CFO. It was a subtle demotion, stripping us of our agency and turning us into a line item on a budget spreadsheet. But the real insult, the thing that made my blood turn into liquid nitrogen, was the deck. Investor Showcase was the Super Bowl of our fiscal year. It was where we would unveil Project Meridian to the heavy hitters, the institutional investors, the private equity ghouls, the people who moved markets with a text message. For months, I had been building the risk and asset section of the presentation. It was beautiful. It was 40 slides of airtight due diligence, mapped out with color-coded risk assessments and mitigation strategies, proved that we weren't just buying content, we were buying an ironclad monopoly. 2 weeks before the showcase, I logged into the shared drive to update a figure regarding the European distribution rights. My file was gone. In its place was a file named Meridian Pitch Final V2 Brad PPTX. I opened it. My 40 slides of analysis had been replaced by 3 slides. 3 were covered in stock photos of smiling families watching TV and buzzwords like synergy, frictionless ecosystem, and infinite scale. There was no mention of the licensing expirations, no mention of the territorial lockouts, and most dangerously, there was a slide claiming we had 100% global perpetuity rights on the entire catalog. We did not have 100% global perpetuity rights. We had about 60% conditional rights, pending the signatures I hadn't given yet. This slide wasn't just optimism, it was fraud. I sat there, staring at the screen, listening to the hum of the AC system. My hand hovered over the phone. I should call legal. I should call the board. "Hey, Emily," I spun around. It was Sarah, a junior project manager. She was young, smart, and terrified. She was holding a tablet against her chest like a shield. "What is it, Sarah?" I just came from the dry run with Brad," she whispered, checking the hallway to make sure nobody was listening. "He's rehearsing the pitch. He took your name off the speaking agenda." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "I'm the keynote for the IP section. The client's legal team specifically asked for me." "I know," Sarah said, her eyes wide. "Brad said. He said you're too technical. He said you kill the vibe. He's going to present the IP section himself." "He doesn't know the IP section," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "He thinks public domain is a nightclub in Vegas." Sarah winced. "He told us to lock the deck. He said nobody is allowed to edit it but him. He said the old guard doesn't get the vision." The old guard, I was 42. I had built this department from a folding table and a laptop. "Thank you, Sarah," I said softly. "You didn't tell me this. Go back to work." She scampered off, looking relieved to not be in the blast radius. I turned back to my monitors. Brad wasn't just sidelining me, he was setting me up. If the deal went through on these lies and then the rights issues exploded later, he would blame clerical errors in my department. He would claim he was given bad info. He would take the bonus, and I would take the subpoena. I looked at the slide claiming 100% ownership. It was a lie. A bold, verifiable, illegal lie. I didn't delete his file, didn't storm into his office. I didn't cry. I opened my email and created a rule. Forward all emails containing Meridian or rights to my private external server. Then I opened the master contract database. The interface was clunky, gray, and looked like it was built in Windows 95. It was the unsexy heart of the company. I navigated to the User Permissions tab. Brad had view-only access. I had administrator. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a demolition expert checking the wiring one last time. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own office. I attended the meetings I was still invited to, sat in the back, and took copious notes in a black moleskine notebook. When Brad made eye contact, I offered a bland, subservient nod. I let him think he had broken me. I let him think I was just happy to still have a paycheck. But while he was picking out the font size for his lies, I was auditing the architecture of his destruction. You have to understand how intellectual property rights work at this scale. It's not like buying a car where you hand over a check and get a title. It's a living organism. It breathes. It has expiration dates, renewal triggers, and performance clauses. I spent my nights at home, a glass of Pinot Noir on the desk, cross-referencing the master agreements with the digital license keys. Here was the smoking gun. The acquisition relied on a key man clause in the software licensing. Years ago, when we first digitized the library, the proprietary encryption software, the code that actually allowed the content to be streamed, was licensed to me, personally, as the designated technical steward. It was a quirky legacy arrangement from when the company was a startup, and I was the only one who understood the tech. Never updated it because nobody ever looked that deep into the back end. The clause stated, in the event of a merger or acquisition, the administrative keys to the content management system, CMS, must be manually transferred by the designated technical steward. Failure to transfer within 48 hours of closing results in an automatic system lock to prevent unauthorized distribution. I checked the metadata. My name, Emily V. Thorne. Status, active. Brad didn't know this clause existed because he had never read the tech stack contracts. He thought the rights were just words on paper. He didn't realize they were physically hard-coded into the servers. I also double-checked the exclusivity clauses with the talent agencies. I had spent years cultivating relationships with these agents. They trusted me. They didn't trust the company. They trusted Emily. I found the emails where I had explicitly stated, "Will personally oversee the transition of these assets." If I wasn't there to oversee it, the exclusivity evaporated. I started printing. I didn't trust the cloud anymore. I printed every relevant contract, every email where Brad dismissed my concerns, every version of the fake deck. I bought a physical safe for my apartment. I felt like a spy in a Cold War thriller, except instead of nuclear launch codes, I was hoarding PDFs of sitcom residuals. Tuesday, 3 days before the showcase, I received an automated alert. Brad had tried to access the master rights database with his credentials. Access denied. I watched the log in real time. He tried again and again. Then he tried to reset the password. Contact administrator, Emily Thorne. He didn't contact me. Instead, 5 minutes later, I got a Slack message from the IT director, a guy named Kevin who I'd shared lunch with for a decade. Kevin, hey Em, Brad's asking for admin rights to the rights DB. Says he wants to clean up the dashboard for the presentation. Should I grant it? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it. If Kevin gave him access, Brad could theoretically clumsily delete the safeguards, or, at the very least, lock me out. I typed back. Per company policy section 4.2, admin access requires a certified IP handling certification due to liability insurance. Does Brad have that certification? I knew he didn't. You have to take a 40-hour course to get it. Kevin, lol, no. Okay, I'll tell him it's a compliance issue and I can't override it without board approval. He's gonna be pissed. Me, let him be pissed. We don't want to void our insurance policy right before a sale, do we? Kevin, solid point. Denying request. I leaned back in my chair. I had just welded the door shut. Brad was going into that meeting blind, deaf, and dumb, armed only with a PowerPoint full of lies, and a smile that was about to get very expensive. The trap was set. Now I just needed to make sure I was in the room when it snapped. The universe has a funny way of balancing the scales, usually right when you think gravity has stopped working. 2 days before the investor showcase, my phone rang. It wasn't an internal extension. It was a 212 area code. York, this is Emily, I answered, keeping my voice professional. Emily, this is Marcus Sterling, General Counsel for the Omni Group. Omni Group, the lead investors, the people putting up the $180 million to fund this entire circus. Marcus was a shark, but he was a shark who respected the ocean. We had sparred over contract language for months, and we had developed a dry, mutual respect. Hello, Marcus. To what do I owe the pleasure? I thought we had finalized the red lines. We have, Marcus said, his voice gravelly and serious. But I'm looking at the agenda for Thursday's showcase in Los Angeles. I see Brad is leading the presentation. I don't see your name on the docket. That's correct, I said, careful not to sound bitter. Brad felt. He felt a higher-level overview was more appropriate for this stage. Bullshit, Marcus said. He didn't mince words. We're not buying a high-level overview, Emily. Buying a rights library. I have questions about the derivative clauses for the Asian markets and the legacy sync issues. Brad doesn't know a derivative clause from a dinner menu. If I ask him, he's going to sweat through his suit and lie to me. I don't like being lied to. I understand, Marcus. I'm calling Brad in 5 minutes, Marcus continued. I'm telling him that if our team is flying out there, you are presenting the IP diligence. Non-negotiable. If you're not on that stage, we don't sign. Clear? A warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't happiness, it was the grim satisfaction of a soldier finding their rifle. Clear. Good. See you in LA, where the armor Emily, he hung up. 10 minutes later, Brad stormed into my office. He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. Change of plans, he snapped, not looking me in the eye. The Omni team wants a deep dive on the legal minutiae. They're obsessive. So, I'm going to let you do a tight 5 minutes. 5 minutes, Emily. Tops, of course, Brad, I said, turning my chair to face him. Do you want me to use your slides, the ones with the 100% ownership figures? His eyes darted around the room. Yes, stick to the script. Don't bore them with the exceptions. Just reinforce the confidence. Sell the vision. Sell the vision, I repeated. And Emily, he leaned in, his cologne overpowering the scent of my tea. Embarrass me? This is my deal. You're just here to check a box. I understand perfectly. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I sat at my kitchen island with my laptop. I pulled up the presentation file. I couldn't edit Brad's master file on the server. He had locked it, remember? But I could create my own. I built a new deck. It wasn't flashy. It was black text on a white background. It was brutal. It was a forensic autopsy of Brad's lies, slide by slide. Slide 1, the reality of ownership. Slide 2, the $50 million liability gap. Slide 3, the licensing key trigger. I saved it to a USB drive, a sleek silver thumb drive that I attached to my keychain. Then I practiced. I rehearsed in the mirror, watching my own face. I stripped all emotion from my voice. No anger, no sarcasm, just data. I had to be a mirror reflecting their own incompetence back at them. The night before the meeting, I stood on the balcony of my hotel room in downtown LA, looking at the city lights. I thought about the 5 years I had given this company. The missed birthdays, the late nights, the stress-induced migraines. I thought about Brad calling me compliance girl. I wasn't doing this to save the company anymore. I was doing it to save my reputation. If I stood on that stage and parroted his lies, I was complicit. If I told the truth, I was a traitor. In the world of rights and licensing, there is no treason. There is only what is signed and what is not. I went to bed at 10 p.m. I slept like a baby. The conference room was on the 45th floor, floating above the smog of Los Angeles like a spaceship. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the sprawl, but nobody was looking outside. The air inside was recycled and expensive, smelling of leather chairs, fresh coffee, and anxiety. The center of the long mahogany table sat the Omni Group team. Marcus Sterling was there, looking like a statue carved out of granite, flanked by 3 junior associates who typed on laptops with terrifying speed. On our side, it was Brad, the CFO, 2 VPs of nothing in particular, and me. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded on top of my closed laptop. I wore a charcoal suit, sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't look at Brad. I looked at the investors. Brad stood at the head of the room, clicking through his slides. He was in full salesman mode. He was animated, passionate, sweating slightly through his dress shirt. "We are looking at a paradigm shift," Brad said, gesturing to a slide that showed a rocket ship taking off. I kid you not, a literal clip-art rocket ship. Project Meridian isn't just an acquisition. It's a colonization of the media landscape. You're capturing 100% of the market share in our vertical. Marcus Sterling didn't blink. He just tapped his pen on his notepad. "And the IP?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through Brad's monologue. "The underlying rights? We've heard rumors of fragmentation in the catalog." "Noise," Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. "Just noise from the competition. We have total control. But hey, don't take my word for it. I've brought our technical specialist, Emily, to give you the thumbs up." He gestured to me like he was introducing a magician's assistant. "Emily, why don't you walk them through the clearance stats? Keep it high level." The room turned to me, the weight of 20 eyes. I stood up. I didn't walk to the podium. I stayed at my spot at the end of the table. I didn't plug my laptop into the projector. I didn't need the screen. "Thank you, Brad," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the acoustically perfect room, carried like a bell. I think it's important we clarify the definition of total control. Brad's smile faltered slightly. Just the numbers, Emily. The numbers, I continued, are as follows. Of the 12,000 assets listed in the Meridian acquisition, 4,500 are currently encumbered by third-party liens. Another 3,000 have territorial restrictions that exclude distribution in the EU and China, our two target growth markets. Typing on the Omni side stopped. The silence was sudden and violent. Furthermore, I said, locking eyes with Marcus, the slide titled 100% perpetuity is factually incorrect. The master agreement stipulates that rights revert to the creators upon any change of control unless specific waivers are signed. Those waivers have not been signed. Brad's face went from tan to a sickly shade of gray. Emily, he said, a warning tone creeping in. I think you're confusing the old data with the new projections. I am citing the contracts currently stored on our server, Brad, I said. The ones you cannot read because you do not have admin access. Okay, that's enough, Brad barked. He actually stepped forward, physically imposing himself between me and the investors. I can't listen to this nonsense. Emily is clearly unprepared and working off outdated spreadsheets. We'll handle the legal deep dive offline. Looked at the AV technician in the corner. Cut the mic, cut it. The technician, a confused kid in a polo shirt, hesitated, then tapped a button on the console. The subtle electronic hum of the room audio died. My voice was no longer amplified. Sit down, Emily, Brad hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. We are done here. A few of the VPs chuckled nervously, taking their cue from the boss. The atmosphere was excruciating. It was the moment where the troublemaker is supposed to shrink away, embarrassed, defeated. I didn't shrink. I slowly closed my laptop. The click of the lid latch sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I looked at Brad, then I looked at Marcus. I gave a small, polite nod. As you wish, I said, and I walked out. I didn't storm. I didn't look back. I walked out the double glass doors, past the reception desk, and toward the elevators. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. I pressed the down button. Inside the room, I imagined Brad was already spinning it. She's having a breakdown. Stress. We'll replace her. But I knew something he didn't. I knew who was in that room, and I knew that Marcus Sterling didn't fly across the country to watch a woman get silenced. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. The elevator didn't come immediately. It was one of those high-speed smart elevators that takes its sweet time calculating the optimal route. So I stood there in the lobby, staring back at the glass-walled conference room. It was like watching a silent movie. I saw Brad turn back to the table, his smile plastered back on, his hands spread wide as if to say, "Women, am I right?" He pointed at the screen, trying to restart his momentum. But nobody was looking at the screen. I saw Marcus Sterling slowly stand up. He didn't look at Brad. He looked at the empty chair where I had been sitting. Even through the thick, soundproof glass, I could see the energy in the room shift. It wasn't a drift, it was a landslide. Marcus said something. He gestured to the door, my door. Brad froze. He looked like a deer in headlights if the deer was wearing a $5,000 suit and realizing it was about to become roadkill. Then, Marcus reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder. I recognized it. It was the due diligence packet I had sent him weeks ago, the real one. He slammed it onto the mahogany table. I could almost hear the thud. The other investors stood up. It was a domino effect. One suit, then another, then another. They weren't checking their phones. They were packing their bags. Brad was frantic now. I saw him grabbing at an investor's arm, a cardinal sin. The investor shook him off with a look of pure disgust. Then, heavy glass doors of the conference room burst open. Emily, it was Marcus. He strode into the lobby, ignoring the panicked VPs trailing him like ducklings. Brad was right behind him, his face a mask of red, blotchy panic. "Marcus, please, she's a disgruntled employee." Brad was pleading, his voice cracking. "She's trying to sabotage the deal for leverage. We have the rights." Marcus stopped. He turned to Brad. He was a tall man, and he used every inch of it. "Cut her mic," Marcus said. His voice was low, dangerous. "You have the only person in this entire building who understands the asset you're trying to sell us, and you silenced her because she told the truth." "She was lying," Brad squealed. "The deck, I have her deck," Marcus interrupted, holding up the file. "And I have yours. Yours is a fantasy, Brad. Hers is a liability report. And quite frankly, if she's not the one holding the pen, we're not interested in the paper." Marcus turned to me. The lobby was dead silent. The receptionist had stopped typing. The elevator finally dinged, the doors sliding open behind me. "Emily," Marcus said, "if you are walking away, we are walking with you." I looked at Brad. He was breathing hard, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked small. "I'm on leave, Marcus," I said calmly. "Effective immediately. All inquiries regarding the IP transfer can be directed to the acting director of licensing." Gestured to Brad. "Good luck finding the encryption keys, Brad. They're 256-bit. I think there's a brute force tutorial on YouTube." I stepped into the elevator. Marcus gave me a grim nod, the kind one warrior gives another after a kill. As the doors closed, the last thing I saw was Brad, standing alone in the lobby, surrounded by the departing investors, holding a laser pointer that pointed at absolutely nothing. The ride down took 40 seconds. It was the most peaceful 40 seconds of my life. By the time my Uber pulled up to my apartment complex, my phone was vibrating so hard I thought it might shatter. 17 missed calls from Brad, 4 from HR, 12 from random numbers I assumed were board members, and 1 text from Sarah, the junior PM. OMG. Brad is throwing a chair. Literal chair. I walked into my apartment, kicked off my heels, poured myself the rest of that Pinot Noir. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window, watching the LA traffic, and turned my phone to Do Not Disturb. Then, I opened my laptop one last time to set my out-of-office auto-reply. Subject, automatic reply, Emily Thornbody. I am currently out of the office on an indefinite leave of absence. For all matters regarding Project Meridian, IP clearance, and strategic licensing, please contact CEO Brad Miller. Note: administrative access to the central rights database remains with the designated technical steward. For transfer of credentials, please refer to the change of control clause in your employment agreement. I hit save. The fallout was faster than I expected. Usually, corporate disasters take days to metabolize. This one took hours. By noon the next day, the industry blogs had picked it up. Headline: Meridian deal implodes. Investors walk out after CEO silences top exec. Variety: $180M acquisition stalled by missing keys. It turns out Brad had tried to access the system immediately after I left. He had called IT. He had screamed at Kevin. Kevin, bless his heart, had quoted the insurance policy back to him. Without me to physically sign in and initiate the transfer protocols, the system had gone into defense mode. Database locked down. The content library, the actual movies and shows they were trying to sell, went dark. The servers, detecting a potential hostile takeover, which, ironically, Brad was conducting, severed the external links. The platform they were demoing to the world, it was now displaying a 404 error. Brad went on a PR offensive. He issued a statement saying I was terminated for gross insubordination and attempted data hostage-taking, threatened legal action. That was his mistake. You don't threaten the person who wrote the contracts with legal action. My personal lawyer, a shark I'd met during a negotiation 3 years ago, sent a simple letter to the board of directors. It attached the original technical steward agreement, signed by the previous board, which explicitly stated that the steward, me, had the right to withhold keys if they believed the integrity of the assets was compromised. Brad had compromised the integrity by lying to investors. I was legally obligated to lock him out. I spent the next 3 days gardening. I planted hydrangeas. I repotted my succulents. I didn't check my email. I drank tea. Every time I looked at my phone, the voicemails from Brad had changed tone. Day 1, anger. Pick up the phone or I'll sue you into poverty. Day 2, bargaining. Emily, look, we can work this out. Just come in and unlock the server. Day 3, desperation. Please. The stock is down 15%. They're going to fire me. Just tell me the password. I deleted them without listening to the end. I wasn't holding the company hostage. I was just following the rules, and for the first time in my career, the rules were working for me, not them. On Monday morning, I put my suit back on, not the charcoal one, a new one, navy blue, the color of authority. I wasn't going to my office. I was going to a cafe in Santa Monica, 3 blocks from the ocean. Sitting at a corner table, nursing an espresso, was LiNa Rostova. She was the CEO of Streamline, our biggest competitor. LiNa was everything Brad wasn't: calculated, brilliant, and famously ruthless about talent acquisition. She didn't stand up when I arrived. She just gestured to the chair opposite her. Emily, she said, her Russian accent faint but sharp. You have caused quite a stir. Brad looks like he has aged 10 years in a week. Brad has a stressful job, I said, sitting down. Managing expectations is difficult. Indeed. Alina took a sip of her coffee. My sources tell me the Meridian deal is dead. Omni Group pulled the term sheet this morning. I heard. They also tell me, Alina continued, her eyes locking onto mine, that you are the only person who actually understands the licensing architecture of that library. And that without you. Library is just a pile of digital noise. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a resume, it was a schematic, a flowchart of a new licensing framework I had designed in my head over the last 6 months, one that solved the cross-border rights issues that everyone said were impossible. I didn't sign the IP over to them, Alina, I said. The methodology, the structural logic for the clearance engine, that's my IP. I licensed it to them for use. The license expires upon my termination. Alina raised an eyebrow. She picked up the paper. She scanned it for 10 seconds. Then she smiled. It was a genuine smile. You created a dependency they didn't even know existed. I created a safety net I corrected. They turned it into a noose. Alina put the paper down. I don't want to buy their library, Emily. It's toxic now. But I want to buy the architect. They're building a new global tier. I need a chief strategy officer. Partner, I said, equity partner, and I bring my own legal team. Alina didn't hesitate. She extended her hand. Done. We shook hands. It was firm. Real. That afternoon, I sent my official resignation letter to the board of directors. It was 2 sentences long. To the board, I hereby resign from my position effective immediately. As my employment has ended, usage license for the Thorn clearance protocol is hereby revoked. Sincerely, Emily, I didn't steal anything. I didn't hack anything. I just took my ball and went home. The fact that the ball happened to be the engine of their entire car wasn't my problem. The collapse of the Meridian deal was spectacular. It wasn't a slow leak, it was a structural failure. Without the clearance protocols, the liability insurance was voided. Without insurance, the bank loans were cut. The stock plummeted 40% in a week. I sat in my new office at Streamline. It was bigger. It had a view of the ocean. And most importantly, it had a door that locked. My phone rang. It was Marcus Sterling. Congratulations on the new post, he said. Streamline, good fit. Thanks, Marcus. It feels stable. We're looking for a new home for our capital, Marcus said, his voice casual. Brad's ship is sinking. We need a vessel that actually has a captain. Lina tells me you're running the rights division there now. I am. Then we're interested. I'll have my team send over the term sheet. But Emily, yes, make sure you're the one presenting. I laughed. I wouldn't have it any other way. As for Brad, I heard about his final board meeting from Kevin, who I hired at Streamline 2 weeks later. Apparently, Brad walked into the boardroom expecting a severance package. He walked into a firing squad. Board asked him one question. Why did you cut the mic? He tried to blame me. He tried to blame the market. He tried to blame the vibe, but nobody was listening. The investors had walked out on him. Now, the board was walking out on him. They fired him for cause. No golden parachute, no stock options, just a cardboard box and an escort out of the building. I saw a picture of him on LinkedIn a few months later, listing himself as a visionary consultant and open to work. I didn't like the post. I didn't comment. I just closed the tab and went back to work. He thought silence was a weapon he could use against me. He thought if he took away my voice, I would disappear. He forgot that in the world of contracts, the most dangerous things aren't the words spoken into a microphone. The most dangerous things are the words written in the silence. The clauses you don't read, people you don't see. He cut my mic. And in doing so, he handed me the loudest megaphone in the world. We closed the Omni Group deal yesterday. $200 million. I signed the contract with my own pen. If you enjoyed watching a corporate suit get taken down by the fine print, you know what to do. Upvote, subscribe, and always read the terms and conditions. You never know who wrote them.
Life has its storms, but it also has its calm waters. Thanks for sharing this moment with me. See you in the next one.